Hello everyone, and welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Sandy Bentley, and the Forge is an area for me to talk about magic, Commander, and anything else that helps me get my mental health out of the gutter that it's in currently. Now, I just want to say Happy New Year, and what I wanted to talk about today was, some of my favorite stuff from the year of 2024, and some of my favorite decks that I built throughout the year, and just kind of general stuff like that. So I guess we'll just start off with what was my favorite release for the year of 2024, and that is going to get Duskmourn. Now, it's really close with Bloomburrow. I did enjoy that set, but the aesthetics of Duskmourn are just kind of more me than, cute and cuddly animals. That said, I haven't touched any of the sets all that much this year, but that's mostly just because I haven't had the time and or money for them. That said, I did build several new decks this year, and I want to touch quickly on my top 3 decks that I built this year. And first up, we have Burakos Party Leader with the Folk Hero background. So Burakos is 3 and a black for a 2/4 orc. He is also a cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. Whenever Burakos attacks, defending player loses X life. You create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of creatures in your party. And Folk Hero is 1 and a white for the enchantment background. Commander creatures you own have, whenever you cast a spell that shares a creature type with this creature, draw a card. This ability triggers only once per turn. I tried my best to try and even out the creature types as I was building the deck. I do know I went much heavier into clerics and assassins than I did most of the other two. White and black just kind of appealed to those, but there's a couple wizards, some warriors, and then like 6 or 7 changelings. So the number of times I didn't have a full party was few and far between. Next up, we have Teysa Opulent Oligarch. 1 white and a black for a 2/3 human advisor with Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, investigate for each opponent who lost life this turn. And then whenever a clue you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. This ability triggers only once per turn. So I didn't necessarily build this as the ping deck like I've seen a lot of people do. I leaned heavier into spirits, so getting multiple creatures with flying. There are still a few things that can say, hey, at the beginning of your upkeep, everyone that's not you loses a life. There are a few of those. But for the most part, we just want to get Teysa down and then start attacking to generate the clues, and then as we make spirits by sacking the clues and we're drawing cards, it just helps feed itself. And then the most recent deck that I put together is kind of at my top spot right now, and that's the Jolly Balloon Man. And I know I talked about him last week, but he is a red and a white. For a 1/3 human clown, he has haste. And for 1 and tap, you create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control, except it's a 1/1 red balloon creature token in addition to its other colors and types. Has flying and haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Activate only as a sorcery. The amount of ramp you can get in this deck, just between the 2 best ramp creatures we have in our deck, which is Core Cartographer and Solemn Simulacrum, good old Sad Robot. And Sad Robot is the best target we have to ramp because the token gets sacrificed and not exiled. So it also draws us a card when it dies. I've only put this deck together in the last few weeks, and in the 6 or 7 games I've played with it, I have ended the game with more than 14 mana on the board, which is insane in a Boros deck. Well, a Boros deck that's not running, like land tax or Sword of the Animist. I don't have any of that in here. I'm just relying on the creatures that can get a land when they enter. So, yeah, it just, the deck is really good. Now, there's another thing I heard about this year, and it got my creative juices flowing. There is a new format that I heard about on Twitter at one point, but I have since moved to the Blue Sky, and I saw more about it there. It's called Pendragon, and it's similar to Commander. The main differences are your commander is a common creature paired with a legendary equipment. So it's supposed to be like Excalibur making Arthur the King of England, basically. And then your deck is 98 commons. And I like this because I know there's ways you can build, well, essentially what I'm looking to build, which is just a battle box. There are enough creatures at common in both the shards and the wedges, so those are all of the 3 color combinations, to make 10 decks. So you have the 5 shards of Alara, and then you have the 5 wedges of Tarkir. And each one of those does have a common creature that has all 3 colors. It gives you access to all 3 colors, and then you don't need to use one of the colored legendary artifacts, and you can just put whatever else you want with it. Or you can. So what I'm thinking is I put them together with the common, and then depending on what one is what, just putting it with the best legendary equipment that I can. So like for Mardu, we have the Ponyback Brigade. It is 3 in Mardu, so red, white, black, for a 2/2 Goblin Warrior. And it says, when Ponyback Brigade enters the battlefield or is turned face up, put 3 1/1 red Goblin creature tokens onto the battlefield. It has Morph for 2 and Mardu, so red, white, black. Each of the common creatures from Tarkir are the morph creatures, so that they all share that in common. But this one in particular just gets paired with Helm of the Host, because all you want to do is make copies of this guy and spam out a bunch of tokens. And that is where I think this deck is going to sit. There's going to be goblins, tokens, sacrifice effects, recursion effects, and removal. And that's just the way it is. But then you look at the Jeskai one, which is the Ifrit Weapon Master. You get 3 in Jeskai, so 3 in red, white, blue, for a 4/2 Ifrit Monk with first strike. When it enters the battlefield or is turned face up, another target creature you control gets +3/+0 till end of turn. And again, it has Morph for 2 and Jeskai. So he's a combat trick on a commander. And so I'm thinking here we do maybe a prowess, go wide kind of deal with things that make tokens, things that make things with prowess, and then you just slap, well, the three things that you get in Jeskai: counter magic, pump magic, and removal. And you call it a day. Now, when you get into the shards from Shards of Alara, you get a bunch of blades. And by that I mean, for Bant, it's the Bant Sureblade. For Esper, it's the Esper Stormblade. For Grixis, it's the Grixis Grimblade. For Jund, it's the Jund Hackblade. And for Naya, it's the Naya Hushblade. Now, the way they work is they all cost 2 mana. One of their mana is hybrid. So in Bant, it's green-blue and then a white. In Esper, it's the white-black is hybrid and then a blue. Grixis is blue-red hybrid and then a black. Jund is black-green and then a red. And then Naya is red-white hybrid with a green pip. And each of them has a thing that cares about multicolored things. So Naya is, as long as you control another multicolored permanent, the Hushblade gets +1/+1 and Shroud. For Jund, it gets +1/+1 in haste. For Grixis, it gets +1/+1 in Death Touch. For Esper, it gets +1/+1 in flying. And for Bant, it gets +1/+1 and First Strike. So it just seems like something that would be fun to show up to like a game night with. And you could have 2 sets of 5. You could be like, hey, this is the Khans of Tarkir one, or hey, this is the Shards of Alara one. Anyway, it just seems like a fun time. Also, it gives you somewhere to put like all of the common like mana rocks and all of the common lands that just don't get used anywhere, like the tap lands that have when it enters, gain a life, or the snow tap lands that are dual typed, or the dual typed tap lands from Dominaria. Just gives you somewhere that actively wants those. I have to check, but I think the artifact lands from Modern Horizons 3 also are common, so those would probably get in there. So you just kind of know what everybody's doing. And I do have to sit down and check rarity on some of the mana rocks. Like I'm fairly certain Soul Ring is still a common. I have to double check Arcane Signet. But when I say the common mana rocks, I mean like the banners from Khans of Tarkir, the Temur banner that can, tap to add the Temur colors, or you can pay Temur and tap it, sacrifice it to draw a card. And there's one of those for each of the Khans wedges. Anyway, I think that's cool. And maybe once I get some of them done, I will make a podcast about that. But anyway, I'm going to take a quick break, and I don't know what I'm going to talk about when I get back. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I'll be right back. And we're back. Now, given how long the first part of this went, I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about like a full deck that I have. So instead, I want to talk about a deck that I've been looking at building from my commander sealed that kind of fell apart in the last couple of months. Anyway, one of the last decks that I built for that was Judith, Carnage Connoisseur from Murders at Karlov Manor, not the other one that I always confuse it with. 3, a red and a black for a 3/4 human shaman. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you choose to either give that spell Death Touch and Lifelink, or create a 2/2 red imp creature token with when this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. Now, there are a handful of cards that were in that deck that are definitely going to make it into the finished deck, and I just want to touch on them real quick, and then some of the other cards that are likely to make an appearance when I build this out. And I'm going to talk first about the creatures that were in that deck, and then I'll move into non-creatures, and then we'll get into the things that are likely going to make it into the deck. So first up, I have the other Judith, the Scourge Diva. 1, a black and red for a 2/2 human shaman. Other creatures you control get +1/+0, and whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Judith deals 1 damage to any target. Now, sure, she won't trigger off of the tokens that the other Judith makes, but making those tokens into 3/2s, yeah, that just seems pretty good to me. Next up, we have the Hoarding Broodlord. 5 black for a 7/6 dragon with Convoke, flying, and when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. For as long as the card remains exiled, you may play it. And spells you cast from exile have Convoke. This is just a big dragon that I happened to pull, so it goes into the deck. Unless I decide to put it in my black-red dragons deck, but it's harder to make more than 2 black at any given time in that deck. Anyway, next up we have Zavane Ripper. 3 black for a 6/5 flying vampire assassin. It has Ward, sacrifice a creature, and whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. After him, we have Urabresk. Just Urabresk. 2 red for a 4/4 Phyrexian Praetor with First Strike. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Urabresk deals 1 damage to target opponent. Add 1 red mana. You can pay red, exile Urabresk, then return to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery and only if you've cast 3 or more instants and or sorceries this turn. And it turns into the Great Work. It's a saga. On step 1, it deals 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control. On step 2, you make 3 treasure tokens. And on step 3, until end of turn, you may cast instant and sorcery spells from your graveyard. If a spell cast this way would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. Exile the Great Work, and then return it to the battlefield. So then it comes back as Urabresk. Which, you know, being able to cast things from your graveyard makes you more mana because he's back on. You get it. Now we have a Squee the Immortal, which is the last creature from the deck that was in there that I want to talk about. 1 red for a 2/1 goblin. You may cast Squee the Immortal from your graveyard or from exile. Now, the main reason we're going to keep him around is because we're going to keep the things that sacrifice creatures, because those are also good with the imps that she makes. So things like Annihilating Glare. It's a single black sorcery. For an additional cost, you either have to pay for or sacrifice an artifact or creature, and you just destroy target creature or planeswalker. Final Flourish, very similar. 1 and a black for an instant. It has Kicker, sacrifice an artifact or creature. Target creature gets -2/-2 till end of turn. If the spell was kicked, the creature gets -6/-6 till end of turn instead. We're also going to be running the things that aren't necessarily removal but do that. Things like Corrupted Conviction. Single black for an instant, additional cost, sack a creature, draw 2 cards. And that's very close to the last card I want to talk about. I got 4 more from the deck I want to talk about, and then I want to talk on just a couple of cards that are definitely going to make it into the deck. First up, we have what was quickly one of my favorite sleeper cards from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, Return the Favor. It's an uncommon instant for red with Spree. So for +1, you copy target instant spell, sorcery spell, activated ability, triggered ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. Or for an additional 1, you can change the target spell or ability with a single target. This also means if you pay 4 mana, you can redirect removal pointed at your creature and make a copy of it pointed at another creature. So it's the number of times I've seen this in the wild where somebody didn't have 4 mana, but they still, redirected to something they needed gone, or just made a copy to get a second thing off the board. Fantastic. Next up, we have Offer Immortality. 1 and a black instant. Target creature gains Death Touch and indestructible till end of turn. There's going to be some protection spells in here, mostly to protect Judith, because while she won't necessarily be integral to the deck running, she will help it a lot. Next up, we have Imp's Mischief. 1 and a black for an instant. Change the target of target spell with a single target. You lose life equal to the spell's mana value. So, again, more protection. And the last card I wanted to talk about that was in the deck, that's going to remain in the deck, is Breach the Multiverse. 5 black for a sorcery. Each player mills 10 cards. For each player, choose a creature or planeswalker card in that player's graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. Then each creature you control becomes a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. That last bit we don't care about. We just like to cast a big sorcery and turn things sideways, basically. So first up, this is going to be an Impact Tremors deck because we know we're going to be flooding the board with tokens. But beyond that, it's also going to be aristocratic with things like Zulaport Cutthroat and all of those. I don't want to go into an exhaustive list of them. But also just more sack outlets that also help trigger Judith, except for this first one. Vampiric Rites is an enchantment, but it's cheap. 1 mana, enchantment, then you can pay 2, sack your creature to gain a life, draw a card. This is going to be a very card-hungry deck. We want to draw a ton of cards. So, Village Rites is 1 and a black for an instant. As an additional cost, you sack a creature, draw 2 cards. And then there's the other version of that, which is Deadly Dispute. 1 and a black. Additional cost, either sack an artifact or a creature. Draw 2 cards, create a treasure token. So those are some of the bigger things that are going to make it in. And then there will be a portion of the deck that is slotted for protection spells. Some of them give indestructible, but most of them are the ones that say, hey, when this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped and do a thing. So just all of those, basically. And then some direct damage spells like, Lightning Bolt and Shock and things like that. Just for the times where, well, that creature is big, but if I do 3 damage and just give this Death Touch and Lifelink, then I don't have to worry about it. And then, yeah, that will be kind of the end of it. Anyway, we're going to bring this episode to the end because we're getting close to half an hour, and that's going to be all. So thanks for listening, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. All of my links can be found in my link tree in the description below. I would like to thank Ian Foss and Cody Mulpey of the band The Crypt for allowing me to use music for my opening and ending, along with Nate and Erica Jacobs for making my original logo. And I would also like to thank Christina McNichol for creating my new logo. And I'll see you next time.